The cage was built in the center of the alien city, heavy iron bars glowing with strange energy to stop even the strongest beast from breaking free. Inside sat the predator, his tall frame bent, his sharp claws tied with glowing chains. His eyes burned like fire, scanning the angry crowd that gathered to see his end. Children hid behind their mothers, men shouted curses, and old ones spat on the ground at the sight of him. They called him murderer, monster, curse. He only smiled, showing sharp teeth, because none of their words touched him. He had lived his whole life with blood on his hands, and death did not frighten him now. Guards stood around the cage with spears of light. They whispered that when the sun touched the horizon, he would be executed. No one doubted it. He was too dangerous to live. He had broken warriors in combat, torn through defenses, and killed without mercy. To the crowd, he was not a living being anymore. He was a beast that needed to be erased. Yet, as they shouted for blood, the predator sat calm, his head low, waiting. His lips curved into a small grin, as if he already knew something none of them did. The council arrived, robed in dark colors, their faces grave. They stood on a high platform above the cage. One of them raised his voice, loud enough for the whole square to hear. "You are guilty of countless crimes. You have killed, hunted, and brought fear to all. By law, you are sentenced to death." The crowd roared with approval. Some threw stones at the cage, though the bars stopped them from reaching him. The predator tilted his head back, laughed once, a sound low and mocking. His laughter cut through the crowd's cheers like a blade. They hated him more for it. The executioner stepped forward, tall and silent, carrying a weapon that glowed with energy, strong enough to end any life in one strike. The children began to chant, "Kill him! Kill him!" The predator lifted his chin and stared at the weapon, his golden eyes reflecting the light. He did not beg. He did not speak. He simply waited, as if eager to see if death would truly claim him. Among the crowd, hidden under a dark veil, a woman watched quietly. She was not like the others. She did not spit or shout. Her eyes studied him with care, searching, calculating. Her hands gripped the edge of her cloak as the executioner raised the weapon high. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from a dangerous thought that no one else would ever dare have. The executioner moved to strike, and the predator's grin widened, almost welcoming the end. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for blood. But then, a clear voice rose from the silence. "Wait!" The sound froze the executioner's arm midair. The council turned their heads sharply. The crowd gasped and muttered. From the shadows stepped the veiled woman, her steps slow but strong, her eyes fixed on the cage. She walked into the center of the square, past whispers and stares. Her veil fell back slightly, revealing her face, a widow known to many, a woman who had lost her husband to raiders years ago. No one understood why she would step forward now, at this moment. She raised her voice again, steady and firm. "Do not kill him. His death is a waste." The council frowned. One of them asked sharply, "What do you mean? He is guilty. He deserves death." She met their eyes without flinching. "Yes, he is guilty. Yes, he is dangerous, but such power should not be thrown away. His skills can serve. He can be made to work, to guard, to protect. A blade like his should not be broken when it can defend." The crowd erupted in laughter and shouts. "She's mad," some cried. "He'll kill her in her sleep," others shouted. "End this monster. Don't listen to her." The executioner lowered his weapon uncertainly, waiting for the council's command. The predator stared at her through the bars, his grin fading for the first time. His sharp eyes studied her, confused. Why would someone stop his death? Why her? The council whispered among themselves, troubled. Finally, the oldest among them spoke. "You ask for a curse to be placed in your home. You ask for a beast that will never obey. If you take him, his blood will be on your hands. His chains will be yours to hold." The woman's voice did not shake. "Then so be it. I will take him. I will hold his chains. I will be his keeper." The predator's eyes narrowed, his head tilting slightly. Something strange stirred inside him. Not anger, not amusement, something he had no name for. The council fell silent, the crowd waiting. At last, the leader gave a slow nod. "So be it. The sentence of death is lifted. He shall not die here. He shall live, under her claim." The crowd screamed in outrage, but the guards obeyed. The executioner lowered his weapon. The glowing chains around the predator rattled as they unlocked the cage. The predator stood tall, his massive form casting a shadow over the ground. He stepped out slowly, every movement powerful, every gaze deadly. The guards flinched back, unsure if he would strike. Instead, he turned his burning eyes to the widow. She stood firm, her hands steady, her face calm. For a moment, time held still as the predator and the woman stared at one another. Hunter and keeper, beast and master, death and life. Then, in a voice low and dangerous, he spoke his first words that day. "You saved me. Why?" His tone was not thankful. It was a threat, a challenge, a mystery. But the woman did not answer. She simply turned, gestured for him to follow, and walked away from the cage. The predator's claws flexed. He could kill her in a heartbeat. But instead, he followed. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the most dangerous being in the city walked behind a lone woman who had claimed his life as her own. The cage stood empty. But something far more dangerous had just been set free. The council chamber was filled with noise as soon as the widow spoke her words. People shouted, their voices mixing into anger and disbelief. Some laughed at her. Others cursed. "She has lost her mind," one shouted. "She will be dead in a day," another yelled. The predator stood silent in his chains, but his eyes never left her face. For the first time, his grin faded. He was not amused. He was curious. The council raised their hands for silence, but the crowd kept roaring. The guards pounded their spears against the floor until the sound echoed like thunder, forcing quiet at last. The elder counselor leaned forward. His voice was sharp. "You dare to make such a request? Do you not know what you are asking for? This creature cannot be tamed. He is death itself." The widow lifted her chin. Her voice did not shake. "I know exactly what he is. That is why I need him. Death is a weapon. A weapon is useless when destroyed, but powerful when used." Her words made the chamber grow still. No one had ever spoken in defense of the predator before. The elder narrowed his eyes. "Why him? Why take such a risk?" She did not look away. "Because my land lies at the edge of the valley. Raiders strike often. Beasts roam the dark. My children are not safe. I have no husband, no soldiers. I cannot fight alone, but he can." A younger counselor slammed his hand on the table. "And if he kills you instead? If he slaughters your children in the night?" The woman's gaze was steady. "Then his blood will be on my hands, as you said before. That will be my choice, not yours." Whispers spread among the council. Some shook their heads. Others muttered that this was madness. Yet there was something in her voice, something cold and determined, that made even the elders pause. She was not begging. She was demanding. The predator finally spoke, his voice low but carrying through the hall. "You wish to own me? Do you think chains will hold me in your house?" His words sent shivers through those listening. The widow turned her head toward him. "No," she answered calmly. "Chains will not hold you, but choice might." The predator tilted his head, eyes narrowing. He had never heard such words before. People feared him, cursed him, hated him, but no one had ever spoken of choice. He laughed once, sharp and cold. "You think you are strong enough to control me?" She did not smile. "I do not need to control you. I need you to decide. Live for nothing or live for something." The council broke into protests again. "This is foolishness. He cannot be trusted." But the elder counselor raised his hand and the hall fell silent. His eyes burned as he looked at the widow. "Very well. You wish to take the monster into your home, so be it. But remember this. When he spills blood, it will not be the council's burden. It will be yours alone." The widow bowed her head slightly. "I accept." The guards were ordered to release the predator from the cage. Their hands trembled as they unlocked the glowing chains. One by one, the bindings fell away. The predator stretched his arms, the sound of bones and muscles cracking, echoing like thunder in the quiet hall. He stepped forward slowly, his shadow stretching long across the floor. The guards quickly moved back, fear on their faces. Even free, the predator made no sudden move. His golden eyes stayed fixed on the widow. He could smell no fear on her, and that unsettled him more than any chain ever had. The elder spoke again, his voice heavy with warning. "He is yours now. If he kills, if he escapes, if he brings ruin, it will be your life that pays the price. Remember that when you bring him under your roof." The widow turned without another word and walked toward the exit. Every step was steady. The predator followed her, his movements slow, almost mocking, as though he wanted to see how long it would take before she looked back in fear. But she never did. The crowd outside was waiting. When they saw him walking free, the square exploded in chaos. Mothers pulled their children away. Men shouted. Some even tried to throw stones again. Guards kept them back with spears. The predator walked past them, tall and silent, with the widow in front. She did not stop for the noise. Her path was clear. At the edge of the square, the widow turned her head just enough for him to hear. "You live because I said so. Do not waste it." Her words were soft, but her tone was iron. The predator's lips curled into a strange half-smile. "You speak to me as if I am a pet," he said. She did not answer. Instead, she continued forward. The crowd stared in disbelief. No one could understand why a woman would take such a risk. They whispered that she was mad, cursed, doomed. Some even bet on how long before the predator killed her. But she ignored them all. The predator walked close behind, every step making the people flinch and scatter. He could have torn her apart in that moment, broken her body, painted the ground with blood. But he did not. Something about her words clung to him, heavy and strange. Live for nothing, or live for something. By the time they reached the road that led to her home, the square was far behind. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. At last, the predator spoke again. His voice was low, dangerous, but not mocking this time. "You think you can use me. Perhaps I will use you instead." The widow did not turn. She only replied, calm and simple, "Then use me. But do not forget, you walk free because I chose it." The predator's chest rumbled with a growl that was almost a laugh. He followed her still, though his claws itched, though his instincts screamed for blood. For the first time in his life, he was not walking toward death. He was walking toward something unknown, something he could not yet name. The house stood alone at the edge of the valley, made of stone and old wood. Fields stretched around it, half-broken fences leaning, tools left in the dirt. The widow led the predator through the gate, her steps slow but calm. Behind the curtains, her children peeked out with wide, frightened eyes. They whispered to each other, their voices trembling. "Mother brought the monster home," one said. "He will eat us," the younger one cried. The widow only raised her hand to quiet them and told them to stay inside. The predator walked behind her, his golden eyes moving across the land. He saw the broken fence, the weak walls, the tools too heavy for her small hands. He smelled the animals nearby, scared by his presence. He heard the pounding of the children's hearts from inside the house. His lips curled into a small grin. Fear was everywhere, just the way he liked it. But there was something strange. The woman herself had no fear in her scent. That unsettled him. She stopped near the fence and turned to him. "This is where you live now," she said. Her voice was plain, not kind, not cruel. She pointed to the field. "You will fix the fences. You will carry the logs. You will guard at night. Do this, and you live." The predator tilted his head, surprised. He had been threatened before, chained, beaten, but no one had ever spoken to him like this, as if he were simply another worker. He let out a low laugh. "You give orders to me? Do you forget I can crush you in a moment?" She met his burning eyes without blinking. "Then crush me. But if you do, you return to the cage, or the crowd tears you apart. Here you live. Outside, you die. Choose." Her words struck him harder than chains. He realized she was not keeping him by force. She was keeping him with choice, the very thing she had spoken of before. At first, he did nothing. He stood tall, arms crossed, as if testing her. But she did not beg, did not explain again. She simply walked away, leaving him to decide. The children locked the door behind her, afraid he might come closer. For a long time, the predator stood in silence, staring at the broken fence. Then, with a growl low in his throat, he lifted one heavy log and slammed it into place. The wood cracked, but it stood firm. His claws dug into the earth as he worked, stronger than any tool she owned. From the window, the children watched, confused. "Why is he helping?" the little one asked. "Because Mother told him to," the older whispered, though she did not believe her own words. They could not understand why the most dangerous killer was fixing their home instead of destroying it. As the sun set, the predator finished the fence and stood watching the horizon. The widow came back, carrying a small lantern. She looked at the fixed wood, gave one small nod, and said, "Good." Then she handed him a heavy stone jar filled with water. "Drink." Her tone was still calm, as if this was all normal. He stared at her for a moment, then took the jar and drank. The water cooled the fire in his chest, though he did not admit it. He set the jar down and asked in a low voice, "Why trust me so easily? Why not tie me like the council wanted? She looked at him steadily. Because chains do not change a beast. Only work does. Then she walked back into the house, leaving him in the dark. That night, he did not sleep. He sat outside the door, sharpening his claws on a stone. The sound scraped through the silence, making the children shiver under their blankets. They whispered, "He is waiting for the right time to kill us." The older one kept her eyes open all night, listening, but the predator never moved closer. He only sat there, eyes glowing in the dark, watching the shadows in the valley. Strange feelings twisted inside him. He could leave. He could kill her, kill the children, and vanish into the night. But he did not. His instincts pushed him, but her words echoed in his mind. Live for nothing, or live for something. He hated the sound of those words, yet they clung to him. The next days passed the same. She gave him tasks, lifting stones, cutting logs, carrying water. He obeyed, though not with respect, only because he had nowhere else to go. Neighbors came to the edge of the land, whispering. They saw the predator moving in the fields, his massive body working like a machine of war turned into a farmhand. They spread rumors in the village. "The widow is mad," they said. "She will regret this. The beast is only waiting to strike." But none dared to step closer. Each night, he circled the land like a wolf, his sharp eyes catching every movement. When wild beasts came near, he scared them away with a roar. When strangers crept too close, he bared his teeth until they fled. The children still feared him, but slowly their whispers changed. "He is dangerous," they said, "but the beasts no longer come near." One evening, the widow stood by the doorway and watched him as he stacked logs. Her voice was quiet but firm. "You are not here as a slave. You are here because you live by my choice. Remember that." He looked at her, his eyes burning like fire, but he said nothing. Instead, he lifted another log. For the first time in his life, he was working not for chains, not for survival, but for something he did not yet understand. The predator felt unsettled. He was treated not as prey, not as a cursed killer, but as if his strength had value. He did not know what to make of it. He was still a predator, still feared, still hated by all. But here, on this broken farm, a widow had turned his death into life. And the strange thing was, he had not yet chosen to walk away. The night was quiet, too quiet. The sky was heavy with clouds that covered the moon, and the valley lay in deep shadow. The widow had put her children to sleep early, their small bodies curled together under thin blankets. The house was silent, only the sound of the wind moving through the broken shutters. Outside, the predator sat near the fence, sharpening his claws on a flat stone. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the dark, scanning every corner of the land. He could sense something was wrong. He had lived his whole life as a hunter, and he knew when danger was near. The silence was not natural. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of sweat and metal. He rose slowly to his feet, his body tense, his muscles ready. He sniffed the wind, and his sharp ears caught a faint sound, the crunch of boots on dry leaves. Raiders. From the edge of the valley, shadows moved. They came in silence, wrapped in black cloth, their weapons glinting faintly in the darkness. They were trained killers, moving like wolves in a pack. The predator narrowed his eyes and let out a low growl, but he did not move yet. He wanted to see how bold they were. The raiders reached the fence. They cut through the wood with sharp blades, the sound soft but clear to his ears. The widow woke suddenly inside the house, her heart racing. She heard the faint break of wood and quickly pulled her children closer. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her voice trembling. She knew raiders had come before, but this time she had something different outside. She looked toward the door, praying the predator would not abandon them. The raiders crept closer, their eyes fixed on the house. They planned to take food, animals, and perhaps worse. One lifted his hand, signaling the others to spread out. They thought the place was unguarded, that only a woman and her children lived here. They did not see the figure standing in the shadows near the fence, waiting for them like a wolf ready to strike. The predator moved suddenly. He was silent at first, a blur of speed in the night. Then his roar split the darkness like thunder. The raiders froze in shock, their eyes wide as the massive figure leapt among them. Claws tore through the first attacker, blood spraying across the grass. Another tried to raise his blade, but the predator's hand snapped his neck with a sharp crack. Panic spread through the group. The widow heard the roar and pulled her children tighter. The little one cried, "It's him! He's killing us!" But she pressed her hand over his mouth. She knew the roar was not for them. Outside, the ground shook with the sound of bodies falling, weapons clashing, and screams cut short. The raiders fought back, but they were nothing compared to him. He moved with deadly grace, his claws flashing in the moonlight when the clouds broke for a moment. He was faster than their blades, stronger than their arms. One raider thrust a spear at him, but he caught it in his bare hand and snapped it in two. With the broken end, he drove it into the man's chest. Another swung a heavy axe, but the predator ducked low and slashed upward, spilling the man's insides across the ground. The air filled with the copper smell of blood. The predator's body was streaked red, his grin wide now, not of mockery, but of pure hunger for battle. He had not felt alive like this since before the cage. But this time, the fight was not for himself. It was not for survival. He was fighting to protect something behind him: the house, the widow, the children. The thought struck him as strange even in the middle of killing, but he did not stop. His claws ripped, his roars shook the raiders' hearts, and one by one they fell. Soon, only one raider was left. Terrified, he dropped his weapon and tried to run. The predator leapt across the fence in a single bound, landing in front of him. The man froze, staring into those glowing golden eyes. The predator leaned close, his voice a low growl. "Tell them, tell all who come here what waits for them in the dark." He let the man go, shoving him back toward the valley. The raider stumbled away, screaming, vanishing into the night. The battlefield grew silent again. Bodies lay scattered across the ground, blood soaking the earth. The predator stood tall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His claws dripped red, his eyes still glowing with fire. He turned slowly toward the house. For a moment, he wondered if the widow and her children would fear him even more now. He looked like the monster they had always believed he was. The door creaked open, and the widow stepped out, holding a small lantern. The golden light fell across the broken ground, the dead raiders, and the predator standing among them like a dark god of war. Her children clung to the doorway, eyes wide with fear and awe. She looked at him carefully, her face calm, though her heart raced. "You saved us," she said simply. The predator tilted his head. He had not thought of it like that. He had killed before, countless times, but never to save. The word felt strange. He wiped the blood from his claws and gave a short nod. "They were weak," he said. But deep inside, something stirred, a feeling he could not name, a strange warmth hidden under the bloodlust. The children looked at him differently now. Their fear was still there, but mixed with something else: wonder. He had been the monster in their nightmares, but tonight he had torn apart worse monsters to keep them safe. The predator felt their eyes on him and turned away, uncomfortable with the weight of it. The widow stepped closer, holding the lantern higher. "The council wanted to throw away your life, but tonight it saved mine." Her words cut deep, sharper than any blade. The predator met her gaze for a long moment. He could have laughed, could have mocked her faith in him, but instead he only grunted softly. Without another word, he turned back to the darkness, watching the valley as if daring more raiders to come. The night grew still again, but nothing was the same. The ground was wet with blood and the air heavy with silence. For the first time, the predator had used his deadly skills not to destroy everything around him, but to protect. And though he did not admit it aloud, part of him wondered if this was what the widow had seen all along. The night after the battle was long and heavy with silence. The predator sat near the fence where the bodies of the raiders had been burned. Smoke still curled into the dark sky, and the smell of blood clung to the air. His claws were clean now, but his mind was not. He had killed again, as he always had, yet this time something was different. For the first time in his life, he had not killed for himself. He had killed to protect. The thought pressed on him like a weight he did not understand. He stared up at the stars, his golden eyes glowing faintly. The woman's words echoed in his mind. "You saved us." That word "saved" felt strange, almost like an insult to what he was. He was no savior. He was a predator, a beast, a destroyer. And yet, her children had looked at him with wide eyes, not only fear, but something else too: wonder, respect. He did not know how to handle that. The widow stepped out of the house quietly, carrying a small clay cup of warm drink. Her steps were steady, though the weight of the night was still on her face. She walked toward him, unafraid as always, and set the cup beside him. "Drink. You need strength," she said. Her tone was calm, not soft, not harsh. Just steady, like always. He did not move at first. He only watched her with sharp eyes. "Why do you keep doing this?" he asked finally, his voice low and rough. "Why do you treat me as if I am not what I am? You know I am a killer. You saw what I did tonight. Why not fear me like the others? Why not end me when you had the chance?" She met his gaze, her face unreadable. "Because fear does not change what you are, and death is easy. Life is harder. I chose the harder path." His claws flexed against the earth. Her words struck him again, just as before. "You speak as if I can be different," he said with a hint of anger. "As if I can be more than claws and blood, but I am nothing else. I was born to hunt, to kill. That is all I know." The widow shook her head slowly. "No one is born for only one thing. You were used as a weapon, yes. You were shaped by blood, but you are still alive. That means you can choose. You chose tonight, even if you do not want to admit it." He growled low in his chest, his eyes narrowing. "I did not choose. I fought because raiders are weak. I fought because I wanted to. Do not mistake it for your kind of honor." But even as he said the words, he felt the lie in them. He could have left them to die. He could have stood aside and watched, but he had not. And deep inside, he knew why. The widow sat on a log near him, her hands resting in her lap. Her voice dropped softer, but still steady. "When I saw you in that cage, I thought death was too small for you. Wasteful. You are strong, yes. Deadly, yes. But strength can be turned. A blade can kill, or it can protect. The blade does not decide. The one who holds it does. I chose to give you the chance. Now you must decide what to do with it." Her words hung in the air like heavy stones. The predator stared at her, his chest tight with something he had never felt before. He had been cursed, hated, chained, but never believed in. Not once. The thought filled him with rage and confusion. He slammed his claw into the earth, cracking the dirt. Why me? Why believe in me when all I have ever done is destroy? For the first time, the widow's eyes softened. Because I know what it means to lose everything. I know what it means to be called useless, weak, broken. I was left alone when my husband died. The council said I could not survive. But I did. Not because I was strong, but because I chose to fight. When I looked at you in that cage, I saw the same thing. Not a beast. Not a curse. I saw someone who has never been given a chance to be more. The predator fell silent. He turned his face away, hiding his eyes. Something burned in his chest, a heat that was not anger this time. He hated the feeling. It made him restless, weak. He had lived his whole life with claws and teeth. But now her words were sharper than any blade. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind blew softly, carrying the smoke of the burned raiders away. Finally, the predator asked in a voice low, almost uncertain, "And if I fail? If I turn on you, on your children? If I cannot change?" The widow stood slowly and looked down at him, her shadow stretching long in the lantern light. "Then I will die knowing I tried. But I would rather die believing you can be more than a monster than live thinking you were only ever one." Her words struck him like a blow. He clenched his fists, his claws digging into his palms until blood ran down. But he did not lash out. He did not rise. He only sat there, the weight of her belief pressing harder than any chain. When she turned and walked back to the house, the predator finally reached for the clay cup. He lifted it to his lips and drank, the warm liquid sliding down his throat. It was bitter, but it steadied the fire in his chest. He stared into the dark valley, where danger still waited, and for the first time, he wondered if perhaps he could be more than what the world had made him. Behind the door, the children whispered. They had heard some of the words. One said, "Mother trusts him too much." The other whispered back, "But he saved us. Maybe she's right." Their young voices carried a mix of fear and hope. The predator heard them through the wood and stone, and his golden eyes closed slowly. He did not understand why their words mattered, but they did. That night, he did not sleep. He sat in the dark, watching over the valley. His claws were still sharp, his heart still wild, but something inside him had begun to shift. He could not name it. He only knew that the widow's question burned in his mind, live for nothing, or live for something. And for the first time, he did not know which one he would choose. The days after the raid changed everything. The neighbors came to see the farm from a distance, whispering about the predator who now walked freely. Some called him cursed, some said the widow was insane, and others feared the day he would turn on her. Yet rumors of the night battle spread quickly. People spoke of the raiders who had been slaughtered, of how a monster had torn them apart before they could harm the widow and her children. Fear mixed with respect, and the whispers grew louder each day. The predator ignored them. He worked in the fields during the day, carrying heavy logs, moving stones, and repairing what the raiders had broken. His muscles moved with deadly grace, but his claws now built as much as they destroyed. The widow gave him tasks without hesitation. "Fix the roof," she said. "Guard the children when I go to the village." He obeyed, though he never admitted why. At night, he walked the land, his golden eyes glowing like fireflies in the dark. The children watched from their window. At first, they still trembled, clutching each other in fear. But slowly, night after night, they began to see the truth. Beasts no longer came close. Strangers kept their distance. Their house was safer than it had ever been before. And though they still whispered about his sharp teeth and deadly claws, they also whispered something else. He is protecting us. One evening, more trouble came. A group of thieves, hearing of the widow's lonely farm, tried to sneak in, thinking they would find weak prey. They never expected what waited for them. The predator met them in silence, his body a wall of muscle and rage. He did not hesitate. His claws flashed, his growls echoed, and within moments the thieves fled, their leader wounded and bleeding, shouting to never return. The next morning, word spread through the village. "The monster guards her now," people said. Some were afraid, others angry, and a few even envious. But no one dared to come near her farm with harm in their hearts again. That night, the predator sat by the fire, sharpening his claws. The widow placed a bowl of food near him. He looked at it, then at her, suspicious. "You feed me as if I am your kin," he muttered. She answered simply, "I feed you because you fight for us. No one can live on blood alone." He stared at her for a long moment, then finally ate. The food was plain, but it warmed him more than he expected. He hated to admit it, but her words were right. He had begun to fight for them. Not just because of chains, not because he had no choice, but because he wanted to. It was a truth he could not escape. The children grew braver, too. The youngest one, who had once hidden every time he came near, began to follow him at a distance during the day, watching as he worked. One afternoon, the child dropped a small toy in the dirt. The predator picked it up with his massive clawed hand and returned it carefully, without breaking it. The boy looked at him with wide eyes, whispered a small "thank you," and ran away. The predator stood there for a long time, confused by the strange warmth in his chest. The widow noticed. She said nothing, but her eyes held a quiet knowing. She saw the change happening in him, little by little, battle by battle, moment by moment. More challenges came. A pack of wild beasts attacked the valley at night, snarling and hungry. The predator met them alone at the edge of the farm. His roars split the night, his claws struck with fury, and when the fight ended, the ground was scattered with the dead beasts. The widow and her children watched from the doorway, safe behind the walls he defended. He stood over the bodies, his chest heaving, blood dripping down his arms, but his eyes turned to the house. Not in hunger, not in threat, but in silent promise. When he returned, the widow placed a cloth in his hand. "Clean yourself," she said. He looked at the cloth, then at her. No one had ever handed him such a thing before. He wiped the blood away, though his claws tore the fabric easily. He grunted and threw it aside, but inside he felt something different. Respect, trust, perhaps even belonging. As the weeks passed, the children no longer whispered about him with only fear. They began to ask questions. Where did you come from? Why are your eyes like fire? Why do you fight like no one else? He gave short answers, sometimes none at all. But each time they asked, he listened. Each time they looked at him with curiosity instead of terror, his chest grew heavier with feelings he could not name. One evening, as the fire crackled low, the predator finally spoke to the widow. "Why do you keep giving me these chances? Why do you treat me as if I can be more? I have killed more than you can count. I have spilled blood without care. I am no protector." She looked at him steadily, her face calm in the firelight. "Because you protect now, not with words, not with promises, but with actions. You guard my children. You guard my land. That is proof enough. He turned his head away, but her words stayed with him. Actions, proof. He could not deny them. He could not deny that he had become more than a weapon. The next day, a traveler passed by the farm. He stopped at the sight of the predator standing guard at the gate. Fear filled his eyes, but then he noticed the widow's children playing nearby, laughing without fear of the monster beside them. The traveler left quickly, carrying with him a story that would spread even further. That the beast who was once sentenced to death now stood as a guardian, a protector. The predator heard the whispers growing beyond the valley. Some called him cursed, some called him tamed, and others spoke of him as a legend in the making. But he did not care about their words. At night, when he stood guard and looked at the house he now defended, he felt something far stronger than fear or hate. He felt purpose. Though he would never admit it aloud, he had begun to fight not just because he could, but because he wanted to keep them safe. And slowly, without knowing when it began, he realized the widow had been right. Chains had not changed him. Work had. Trust had. And for the first time, he was no longer fighting for nothing. He was fighting for something. The day came when the council returned. Word of the predator's survival and his new life on the widow's farm had reached every corner of the valley. Stories spread fast. Some said he was still a monster waiting to strike. Others said he had become a weapon of protection. And a few even whispered he was something more. But the council did not care for rumors. To them, their sentence had been final, and their pride wounded by the widow's defiance. They arrived with guards, banners, and the heavy weight of judgment. The predator stood at the edge of the farm when he saw them approach. His golden eyes narrowed as he watched the line of armored men marching forward. The widow came out of the house, her children close behind her. She looked at him once, calm but serious. "Today they will try to take you back," she said. He gave a low growl. "Let them try." The council leader raised his hand, and the guards fanned out across the field. "Widow," he called, his voice sharp, "we gave you a chance, and you have used it to mock our laws. The beast walks free, covered in blood again. His crimes cannot be forgiven. Release him to us now. He will face the death he was meant for." The widow stepped forward, her head high. "No," she answered firmly. "He is no longer only death. He is protection. He has saved me, my children, and even this valley from raiders and beasts. His blood has been spilled not in crime, but in defense. You would waste what is now a shield for us all." The crowd that had gathered to watch murmured, divided. Some shouted, "He's still a monster." Others whispered, "But he saved her. He saved them." The predator stood tall, silent, his eyes fixed on the council. He knew he could tear through their guards if he wanted. His claws flexed, ready, but something inside him held back. This was not just a fight of strength, it was a fight of proof. The elder counselor sneered, "You cannot tame death. It will turn on you, and all will suffer. We end it here, before more are lost." He lifted his hand to signal the guards, but before they could move, the widow stepped in front of the predator. She spread her arms wide, shielding him with her own body. "Then you must kill me too," she declared. Her voice rang across the field. The crowd gasped. The children cried out, clutching at her skirts. The predator's eyes widened. For the first time in his life, someone had placed themselves between him and danger, not out of fear, but out of loyalty. Rage boiled in his chest, but it was not the old rage of bloodlust. It was the rage of someone who refused to lose what had finally been given to him. He stepped forward, towering over her, and faced the council with a snarl that shook the air. "Enough," he growled. "You call me a monster, a curse, a beast. Maybe I was. But look at your valley now. Who hunts the raiders? Who tears the beasts from your doors? Who guards when your laws fail?" His voice rose, deep and thunderous. "It is me, and I will not be caged again." The guards hesitated, their spears trembling. They had heard the stories of what he had done, seen the fear in the eyes of those who had faced him. To fight him now seemed like suicide. The elder shouted at them to advance, but none moved. The predator's presence alone held them frozen. The widow turned to the people watching. Her voice carried, strong and steady. "You call him death, but death would not have saved us. He did. You call him a curse, but curses destroy. He built. You call him a monster, but a monster would not stand here beside me, protecting my children. He is more than what you say. He is more than what you fear." Silence spread. The crowd, once full of doubt, now looked at the predator differently. They remembered the raiders, the thieves, the beasts. They remembered how the widow had lived when others would have perished. Slowly, one man in the crowd raised his voice. "He saved my brother's farm." Another woman called out, "My child would have died if not for him." More voices joined, rising together until the field echoed with shouts of support. The elder counselor's face twisted with anger. He tried once more. "He will betray you all in the end. He cannot change." The predator stepped forward, his golden eyes burning. "Dano, maybe I cannot," he said, his voice rough but strong. "Maybe blood will always follow me. But here I fight for something. For them." He pointed toward the widow and her children. "For once in my life, I fight not because I must, but because I choose to. And that choice is mine." The crowd roared in answer, their voices drowning out the council. The guards lowered their weapons, unwilling to fight against the will of the people, or against the beast who now had their respect. The elder counselor's power crumbled before him. With no one left to command, he turned and left in silence, his pride broken. When the last of the council was gone, the widow looked up at the predator. For the first time, he bowed his head. Not to chains, not to fear, not to power, but to respect. The children rushed forward, clinging to their mother, and for a moment their eyes turned to him with something more than fear. Gratitude. Trust. Even a small spark of love. The predator stood among them, his claws still sharp, his body still dangerous. But now he was not only a weapon. He was not only a curse. He was part of something greater. His deadly skills had found a new purpose. And though he did not say it aloud, he knew the truth at last. He was no longer living for nothing. He was living for them. The wind carried away the last smoke of the burned raiders, and the valley felt different. Safer. Stronger. The predator turned his eyes to the horizon, still ready for whatever dangers would come. But for the first time, he did not face them alone. For the first time, he was more than a monster. He was family.